Well, your concern is they're not preaching. They might be teaching, they might be lecturing, they might be putting on a show, but your contention is they're not preaching. And here's what I'd like to explore with you now, Dr. Lawson. You have said that a pastor must bring some passion, some fervency to the message, and yet with their own personality. Mm-hmm. When you preach, you're kind of a lion. Not every guy is like you.
Right.
Can somebody be softer spoken? Maybe not as, they don't use their voice as inflexibly as you do. Can they still be an effective preacher?
I would say yes, to a point. That they cannot be monotone, and they cannot be just a straight line, because that's not really preaching. The word preaching comes from a Greek word, caruso, which was used of the herald who was dispatched from the palace of the emperor, who would travel to the perimeter of the Roman Empire and go into a village and gather the people around him. And he would cup his hands and lift his voice and say something like this: hear ye, this day Rome has won a great victory. Another kingdom is annexed into the empire. Or he would say something like this: hear ye, this day Caesar has a son. There's an heir to the throne. You cannot deliver a heralding message like that with a library inside voice. There needs to be a dynamic that emerges from the depth of your soul, that just comes out even in the tone and the trajectory with which you speak. Now, you do not have to be loud like someone else, though you may be. Obviously, even with a loud voice, there needs to be fluctuation, like the ocean goes in and out and out. But for the preacher who comes across as rather quiet, he may need to either examine, am I really called to preach? Or should I just be in a classroom teaching? Or do I need to pray that God gets a hold of my heart, and that there is a greater burden and a greater sense of responsibility before the Lord to deliver this message as though I really believe this message? Todd, I remember one day when I was in seminary, we have to preach to one another, and the professor is grading us. And I remember that there was a fellow student who was up preaching to the class, and it started off slow, and then it tapered. Then it tapered off. I mean, this thing
went down from there.
It went down from there. This message was going nowhere fast. And the professor comes back out of the little sound booth and stops in the middle of the sermon and says, "You don't believe that?" And the guy goes, "Well, I do." He goes, "No, you don't believe that." Well, the guy finally got worked up and said, "I do believe that," and kind of pounded the desk in front of us. And the professor said, "Great, now go back up into the pulpit and preach like that. Like you really believe it, where you're not just standing there reading your notes to us." So what I would say is everyone needs to find their own voice and know their own temperament and personality. But whatever that is, it needs to be doused with the power of the Holy Spirit, and for the words to have penetrating power into the hearts of people. And you come across like you really believe this.